music, how faint the tune. Somewhere there's heaven, how high the moon. There is no love when love is far away too. Till it comes true that you love me as I love you. Somewhere there's heaven, it's where you are. Somewhere there's music, out here how far. The darkest night would shine if you would come to me soon. Until you realize in my heart, I don't know. I the moon, it's the song. I the moon, no word may be wrong. We're singing it because you asked for it, so we're swinging it just for you. How high the moon, does it touch the stars? How high the moon, does it reach up to Mars? Though the words may be wrong to the song, you're asking high, 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 high is the moon. Ooh, beauty, 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 beauty,
You try and get it high enough for you to get that you want. Okay. I'll suffer with you. No.
turn off that good music, I love it.
There's a little more.
Okay.
No worries.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Paul Robinson from Parker Millard there in Columbia, Jeff City. And it's amazing to see such a tribute to a fine man. I love it. It's just fantastic. Like I was saying earlier, there's so much negativity in the world. And now we see someone here. Everything about him was positive. And look, the legacy that he left for everybody. It's all positive. In a world of negativity, that's a reassuring thing. David's going to come down and finish up the process here. And you're welcome to mill around, do whatever you want to do, and take it in any direction. There's no wrong way to do this. So help yourself, sit back and relax, and savor the moments with a super nice guy. God bless you.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
So, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is great. I think this is more people than were at the funeral of Prince Philip last weekend. the Duke of Edinburgh, and I think that somewhere Michael is just sort of chuckling inside about that. So I just want to say welcome to this service that's honoring the memory of Michael Buds, friend, colleague, teacher, relative. You know, almost invariably, I don't know if those of you who knew Michael as a child may not know this, but as an adult, if Michael went to a concert and then you asked him the next day, how did it go, or what did you think of it, he would always say, well, there were good things and less good things. So the less good thing today is the weather, although it's not as bad as it could be. But the good thing is that so many of you are here today to honor his memory. So thank you for being here. Music was obviously central to Michael. He loved music passionately. He loved all kinds of music, unequivocally, without any kind of judgment. So there will be there will be some music today, and these are all pieces that he specifically asked to be played at his memorial service. There's also a poem that he asked that it would be read. So these are all things that Michael asked for, and so in a certain sense this is his show, which, as we all know, is how he would kind of want it to be. So we're gonna have a few of Michael's friends from different parts of his past life share some memories, and then we'll share some more music, and then there will be a time for any of you to briefly talk about your relationship with Michael and any special memories that you have that you want to share. So let's start with Quentin Kuiper, and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves and talk about their relationship with Michael. Quentin?
Hi, my name is Quentin Kuiper. I first met Michael about 50 years ago when we were students, and shortly after that I had moved to Columbia, Missouri, and then he came to Columbia, and the next 20 years we worked in the same building and ate lunch and had lots of conversations. So 50-year friendship, pretty amazing. I think that many of the people that are going to speak later today will tell you wonderful things about Michael, about his being an absolutely wonderful intellect and a scholar and a wonderful teacher, and I agree with all that. There's one thing I think you need to know about Michael. One other very important thing is he hated vegetables. The thought of having to eat a piece of broccoli would just send him into a twitter. And
amen.
And if he got on a tear about how he hated onions, his language was practically poetic. Yes. It was just wonderful. He did make an exception for French fries, however. He told me a story many times about, I think this distrust of vegetables was of long standing, and he told me the story many times about when he was a child, his mother told him that he had to finish his plate, which included some vegetables, peas or something, and he had to finish it or before he went to bed, before he could go out to play. And he would always tell me with great glee that he never finished the plate. His mother finally gave up and allowed him to go to bed. He didn't like to be told what to do. Ever. And I think that might have some relationship to his relationship with his various department chairs later in life. He was a very efficient person. I was always amazed at how he could watch television, play with his dog, and grade graduate student papers all at the same time and do all of them very well. But because of that efficiency, I think his life was governed by efficiency. He did not waste time. He did not waste his athletic ability on other things. He concentrated entirely on the sport of croquet. He was very successful at croquet. He had some good skills, but one of the main reasons why he could win so many times was he knew more rules than anybody else.
It also allowed him to smoke and play.
Yeah, that was one
I
of
think
his.
that was important.
Yeah, he could swing the mallet with one hand and smoke with the other. If he had a third hand, it would have been drinking a Diet Coke. I'll tell you just one more story that I think is important about the Michael Buds that I knew. He was, one of his hats was to be an editor, and some of the times he did his editing online by email with the various authors of the books that he was helping them with. But if the author happened to be a local person, then there would be local consultations. And one of his friends, James Burke, wanted to have his book about everything you want to know about Charles Ives published. It's a huge book because there's a lot to know about Charles Ives. They had, James and Michael both had pretty good ideas about what the book should be and what it should look like and what the language should be, and it didn't always coincide. And I remember many conversations with Michael about how he was frustrated, maybe even exasperated with James. They were good friends. I mean, many of us would go have lunch together, so they were friends, but he and James were pretty well exasperated by the time the book came out. And then after it was finished, James' health took a turn for the worse and was in the hospital for quite a long time. And Michael, I think, was one of the few people who actually regularly went to the hospital to visit James. And then James started slipping away. And Michael is the one that took the boombox to James's room and played the music of Charles Ives for James. And that's the Michael Buds that I knew.
Thanks, Ben. Greg?
I'm Gregory Fuller, and I'm in Mississippi these days. Just so you know, his number one fear in life was to be dropped into a vat of mayonnaise. Just another one of those things. I came to the University of Missouri in 1983 to work on a MM, and by my second year, they stuck me in a little bitty office around this corner in a cubby hole on the second floor. And next to was a man that I had only met through intro to grad study by the name of Michael Buds. So 5 years, our office doors were open side by side. Couldn't see him, but I talked to him all day. We became lifetime friends. To show you how small the world is, I live in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and one of my neighbors is Sam Bergnotti. So yeah, and as a Sheila, and I know that Sheila ended up helping David decorate a house here in town after they sold and moved, and I've thought so many thoughts about what I could say today. It's just very difficult to come to the conclusion, but I thought yesterday as I drove north, I saw the sign for Kennett, and I thought, well, I remember that every year administrators would grab Michael Buds and take him to the south end of the state why would you take the same person because he could speak like nobody else? And then I want to say that he taught 1 year of public school, and it was in Ramsey. And I drove there through this morning, and I thought if I could just talk to an alumni about being in choir with Michael Butts for 1 year. It is very appropriate that we are here because I think that a lot of Michael's insights and wisdom found their genesis here in this place. He talked about Pena always. It was important. It's also funny that we're here because Michael loved nowhere more than a gravesite. I mean, I'm the guy who took Michael everywhere. You know, Michael didn't want to go anywhere, really. He didn't want to drive anywhere. He got to the point he didn't want to go. But if you could promise him either a gravesite, a presidential library, or a state capitol, he'd get over the fear of going. He really, Michael was a pilgrim. He wanted to go on pilgrimages. And, you know, we all know what a great scholar and how he was just genius about so many things. But you can't just be a genius about something and be the great teacher that he was. He was a great storyteller. I mean, Garrison Keillor had nothing on Michael Buds. And you know, if the stories I tell here, for a couple of them aren't funny to you, the reason I've chosen them is because they were very funny to him. And one of my favorite things was watching him laugh at himself. You know, they're almost genres. One of the genres of stories is about this place. You know, and he would talk about David and Jeannie and Mom and Pena. And I remember one time he would say, yeah, one night David and I threw Mom and Jeannie in the car went to Springfield for a movie. And he said, you know, we got there. And of course, what do? You divide up and go to the bathrooms. And he said, yeah, I was in the bathroom, I looked left. And Mom and Jeannie were shuffling into the men's bathroom. And I stood there for a minute, very confused. They shuffled back. And so I was still standing there for a while. They shuffled back into the men's bathroom. I looked and saw him again, and he was not in position to go do anything about it at the time. And the man next to him says, do you know who those people are? He said, I've never seen them. Another story he loved to tell, because you have to know, well, first of all, there's the daily life turned into tragedy stories. I mean, you know, one time I'd had him in Prague, and he had bought eggs. I don't know if there's a street in Prague nearby that they somehow blow out the insides and they do the decorative eggs and paint them and stuff, and they're fancy. And he had, you know, for him, the pride of ownership, you know. So Michael had bought those eggs. I didn't know what he was going to do with them, but he had them. And that's what was important. And one night he called Brady. Tragedy. I said, what? He says, well, the washing machine was running, and I heard a crash. And I went in, my eggs were in the washing machine. They vibrated off and fell on the floor. And he said, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together. I don't know if you know Michael. Michael struggled to find things because he had a very busy life and his surroundings were busy with clutter. And everybody who loves Michael has been asked at one time or another. He would always, you know, you have to go show that you paid your taxes to get your car tag in Missouri, or you used to. He'd always say something like, if you were my tax receipt, where would you be? And just those tragic things. So, but another of his favorite genres, and boy, could I go all day. It's not all of them are rated PG. But, you know, if you can think of the two things, you know, those tests, these two things don't belong together, that would be Michael Buds and boot camp. And so he has the genre of the United States Navy. And he could tell you how many years, months, days, and hours he served in the United States Navy. But it enriched his life in many ways, beyond maybe even what he knew and his stories. But as you know, Quentin's already alluded to the fact that Michael was not a athletic person in any way, shape, or form, by build or by inclination. But he was in boot camp, and I think his drill instructor figured out pretty quickly that Michael was the sharpest stick in that box. Okay, So, if my understanding is right, his father was the bookkeeper for the rose growing company at one point. Michael became the bookkeeper for his platoon in boot camp. And of course, Michael was going to leverage this. So what did Michael want? Michael wanted to be able to go outside and smoke a cigarette. So he said, look, I do all this for you. I want you to let me go outside and smoke. So Michael says he would go outside and smoke, and the drill instructor would join him outside. And they would have, I'm certain it was a Marlboro 100, had to be. And Michael said one night they were smoking, and he looked at the drill instructor and said, you know, I'm never getting out of here. Drill instructor, what are you talking about? And he looks and says, well, you know that wall, you have to run at it, and then grab that rope and climb over the top. He says, I'm never getting over that thing. And the drill instructor said, why don't you let me worry about that? So Michael said, the last few days passed, he got there in his short little fat legs. He was just running as fast as he could towards that wall, was going to grab that rope. He said he got within about 10 feet of that wall, and he felt himself being lifted up. And they got the two biggest people in the platoon, and he said, I was sailing through the air. And they literally threw him over the wall, and he sailed to the other side. He loved to tell that story. So, a little bit longer, but I'll close with this. You know, so I think of it this way. Michael was probably in his mid-50s. My mother was in her mid-70s. And I wanted Michael to come see me in Mississippi. And so, once again, as I said before, how am I going to get him to do that? Hey, he's not going to drive anywhere. So, the first step was how do I get him there without flying him? And he gets the airport's not a good scene for him. So, my mother loves to drive and go. So, my mother was of a certain generation. She loved free stuff and cheap stuff. I get it, honestly. And there was always a free cup of coffee at the Hardee's or the McDonald's in Hardy, Arkansas. So I could get her to drive him to Arkansas. Of course, he's 55, won't drive. I went and got him. Of course, the promise was the William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Library. I mean, it was grave sites. It was the state capital of Arkansas. I mean, this was going to turn into a major, major pilgrimage for him. So I got him to come. And I spent all day at the Clinton Library with him, and you know him, he'll go. You just stand and say, look, and you go, now wait. All the things he would say. So we went through that, but the two highlights were the big grave days. I mean, Michael, first of all, you know, he's going to bring flowers in honor of Pena and his dad. He's going to give a reflection, get very misty, and then he's going to look at me and say, take a picture. And then he's going to smoke because he's emotionally, by the way, they should redefine veranda because Michael would always say, I'm going to the veranda to smoke. That could be St. Peter's Square in Rome. It could be the sidewalk on Hitt Street. The veranda was everywhere. But anyway, so Michael, I took him. How many know the Robert Johnson legacy? Robert Johnson was the great blues player, and he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. So I was taking him on the big trip. I mean, we went into the Mississippi Delta, and Robert Johnson, Mozart, died on a rainy night. And the legend is there's 3 grave sites. They don't know where he's at. And there's 3 tombstones. And we're going to go to every one. We're going to get there. We're going to have the flowers. We're going to have the little eulogy he'll deliver. We'll have the picture, and we'll have the smoke. You know. And so we got to the first Robert Johnson gravesite. We're going to all 3. It's near Greenwood. And it's in the middle of nowhere. We're standing, I mean, you can't, it's a little cemetery that would be, 20 by 20. And he says, he had a lazy eye. He always found a woman to keep him. Then he just disappeared. And finally, picked the wrong woman. Jealous lover put glass in his drink. Died a horrible death. And he was just... So we did that. We drove 35 more minutes. We found the next gravesite. Went there, Michael says, he had a lazy eye. Always found a woman to keep him. Picked the wrong woman. Jealous lover put glass in his drink. Died a horrible death. So we got the third one. You know.
Oh no.
Had a lazy eye. Always found a woman to keep him. Picked the wrong woman. Jealous lover put glass in the drink, and I said, and he died a horrible death. And Michael said, he did, and don't get fresh. And if you know Michael, Michael was, yes. Don't be fresh. So the last one I'll tell you, it'll be the memory that I'll have for the rest of my life. So Graceland was the big ticket on that trip, because for some of it's Elvis, but for Michael, Elvis is a major player in the 50s and rock and roll. He's a major player and redefining the American musical. If he was here, he could tell you why. But Graceland is one of those places that's touristy, but in many ways very meaningful for a lot of people. And when you get to Graceland, the first thing you do is you go in and you sit in a movie, and the movie's entitled Walk a Mile in My Shoes. Well, they play all that Elvis music, and people are very emotional. I mean, when the lights come on, and not to be the wrong here, but a lot of women of a certain age are just in puddles of tears by the point that movie's over. I looked at Michael, he wasn't doing so well either. He was misty and weeping, and so we got a cigarette. And we would go and we'd start through the Elvis's thing, and we'd go about 5-10 minutes, and he's got the headset on. They give you a headset, Elvis music played really loudly in your ears. And so he's talking loudly and telling me everything. And about every 5-10 minutes, we'd go outside. He was really emotional. I mean, listening to that music. Well, we went through, probably took us what should have been 45 minutes to an hour and a half. We were stopping, we were going, we were reading every exhibit. And at the end, you come to the grave sites. And there's Elvis and Elvis's parents. And the sign clearly says, turn your headset off. And so we got there. Well, Michael didn't turn his headset off. And I'm standing, there's probably 75, 80 people. And he's standing right here in front of Elvis. And I'm standing right here in front of Dad. And of course, Michael's continuing to educate me all day long, which I loved, but he's making sure I know every detail. And he's talking about Elvis's dad. He looks right at me, but nobody's paying attention to us. He points and goes, might 50 people around, many of them who were the women who were sobbing after the movie. Michael says, with his headset on full blast, he was a criminal, you know. And in that moment, everybody went, everybody there looking at us. And Michael realized instantly what he'd done. And if you've ever watched Michael laugh at himself, he was out of control. And he just walked off and left me there with the whole crowd. But I would suggest to you that today we are the Pilgrims.
Thank you. Stacy?
My name is Stacy Height, and I met Michael Buds in 1984 when I came to university as an undergraduate student. And I have been blessed to have had Michael Buds as my teacher, but my richest blessings have come from years of sharing life celebrations, chores, and life cycle events with him, some of which I'd like to share with you. I remember him attending my 1997 conducting chamber singers concerts as a graduate student, and I remember him telling me, which I held on to for years and years. He said that was one of the most beautiful concerts from a graduate student that I've heard in a really long time. And he just wasn't that fluid with compliments like that. He was also present when I conducted at the 1999 MEMA convention, which was a very big deal. We would take trips together and visit other friends. One time I can recall, we were driving and we wrote our own R&B song. Oh baby, your lovin' so fine, with your heartbeat next to mine, and so forth. I can remember driving him to, I just remember it was south of Clinton, Missouri, to pick up Max when he was a puppy. and how excited he was to have him. I celebrated many birthdays with him, and about 30 years ago, Cheryl Nichols called his mom Helen Buds to get the recipe for his favorite sour cream chocolate cake. He would look forward to that for weeks, and then, of course, would ration it out to last as long as he possibly could. I did a lot of things with him and for him that were cleaning his office, cleaning his home. When I was an undergraduate student, in the summertime, he had grapevines on his property, and he would say, "Staceline, the grapes are ready." And we would go pick grapes and then make kind of our own little assembly line, and would make grape jelly, and lots of laughter and sweat and frustration, but always laughter and always music. 2016 was the last time that I was here in Pana, and I had helped him go through his brother's house after he had passed, and he shared so many childhood stories with me, and so many that he recalled with absolute perfect clarity. Life cycle events that happen for all of us, whether that's me getting a new job, or starting a new relationship, or ending their relationship, or the death of my mother and father, being with him when he had to put his beloved Roxy to sleep, the death of his mother, sister, and brother. I moved back to Columbia in 2018, and being with him through his illnesses and hospital visits, and bringing him cigarettes and Diet Coke even a week before he died. I was very thankful that I got to be there those last couple years. So I just want to leave you now with a few of the many Buddhisms that he used throughout the years that I have now adopted for myself. First of all, we don't really use the word medium anymore. Now we use the word moderato. Is the refrigerator cold? Moderato. How's the pressure in the shower? Moderato. Wait a minute is now one minuet. Can I call you in one minuet? Even now, when I leave my house, even though I don't smoke, I will say, have we extinguished all smoking materials? And I never liked his cigarette smoke. And as I got older, I was bolder with verbalizing my displeasure. And he would respond, "It must be terrible to be so delicate." Which I now use with my students when they complain about homework assignments. My father did the best that he could, but oftentimes he was unavailable emotionally. Michael Buds saw me, the real me with all my scars and all my promise, in a way that my father could not. And because of that, I loved him so much. Because I knew you, Michael Buds, I have been changed for good.
So we're going to listen to some music. As I said, Michael provided a list of music, his favorite artists and his favorite pieces that he wanted played. We're not going to actually play the whole list, don't worry. It was kind of a long list. But Bach was one of Michael's favorite composers, and this is one of the arias from a Bach solo cantata number 82. It's called, in German, Schlummert ein. I'm going to read the translation, and when I do, and when you think about how Michael passed away when he did, you'll understand how appropriate this was. So this is Schlummert ein. Fall asleep, you weary eyes, close softly and pleasantly. World, I will not remain here any longer. I own no part of you that could matter to my soul. Here I must build up misery, but there I will see sweet peace and quiet rest. now we thought it might be appropriate. We've all known Michael in different ways at different times of his life. Different times of our lives, and we thought it might be nice for, if you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself, tell us how you knew Michael, and then share a brief, hopefully happy, funny story, or could be about a cantankerous event in his life. But anyway, I would just invite any of you who want to say a few words to say a few words. Kay. This is Dr. Kay Hoke. I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm also somebody who knew Michael for probably 45 years, not quite as long as Quentin maybe, but almost as long. And we met in Iowa City. And the way we met is I had an office, and because I'm called by my middle name, my office tag said S.K. Hoke. And Michael thought I was a nun. And he decided that he had to meet me. And so he tracked me down, and we became fast friends and had many, many adventures over the years. But one of the things we always used to say to each other, every time we saw each other and talk on the phone, was, let's remember, we're only here for a visit. And so I think that's kind of an appropriate thing for all of us to remember today. But some of the experiences that I had with him were probably slightly different. We used to do our laundry together at the We Wash It on Sunday afternoons in Coralville, Iowa. And we'd sit and gossip and talk about musicology and have a marvelous time. But I'm just going to tell you about a couple of adventures we had. So King Tut was coming to the Field Museum in Chicago. And so Michael and my then, well, he's now my husband, he was not my husband then, but Dixon, and then Nancy Galvin, who was, Michael collected scientist female friends while we were in Iowa City as well, and Nancy was one of these. She was a biologist, and so the four of us left at something like 2 in the morning because one couldn't get to, it was a matter of getting there early in the morning, standing in line and getting a number to be able to go in and see King Tut. And this was the first time King Tut came to the States, and the Field Museum was one of the first places that landed. And so we drove in the wee hours of the morning, and we had the radio on the whole time. And one of the songs that was the top song at that time was Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke. And in Sir Duke, there is a reference to Ella Fitzgerald. And so every time, I don't know if you ever heard Michael sing. He was not a singer. But every time that would come in, Michael would bellow it out. And I think we must have heard that song 100 times on this trip, because we did it, well, we sort of did it as a, you know, we were I don't know, we were poor graduate students, and so we weren't going to stay overnight anywhere. So we spent the day in Chicago, we saw King Tut, we went to Greektown, had dinner, got back in the car, and drove back to Iowa City, which is a long drive, and we heard Sir Duke about 50 more times on the way back. Another thing is that Michael was a witness at my wedding, and his name is on my marriage certificate. And I had forgotten about, I hadn't seen my marriage certificate in years, and so Michael and I had a long phone call, over the summer, after he had come back from the hospital. And so it was a long and you know, really kind of heart-rending call that we had had. And I was rummaging through some things because I was getting ready. I'm on a 2-year temporary position that I took, so I'm living in Indiana for 2 years. And so I was going through things, and I had gotten married in Indiana, in Indianapolis. And so Michael had made the trip down for the wedding. And I came upon my marriage certificate, which I think I hadn't seen in 30 years, and there was Michael's name. And so that the night after the ceremony, it was a very simple thing. It was done over a Thanksgiving weekend because it was a 3-day weekend. And so graduate school friends came, we all stood at the front of the altar in an Episcopal church, and one of the women who was that first group of females who were ordained as Episcopal priests was officiating at this. And so afterwards, we went back to the apartment complex where Dixon and I were living to have a little gathering in the party house there. And Michael stayed overnight with us that night. And then the next morning, we heard a knock on our bedroom door, and Michael came in and waved and said, I need to get on the road now. So Michael spent my wedding night with me.
That's great.
So anyway, you know, there are many, many more stories that I could tell, but we remained friends over all of those years, and for many of them, we had a weekly phone call. As time went on, you know, the phone calls got farther apart, but every time he phoned, I'd answer the phone and he'd say, yoo-hoo! And so, you know, I will remember him always. And one more thing that was really wonderful, because it was a seminal event in his life. He loved Joan Sutherland, and Joan Sutherland came to sing in Hampshire Auditorium. So Michael orchestrated a dinner party, and there were about 6 or 8 of us who were a part of this venture. And he wanted to make sure. I mean, we had this lovely dinner. We went to Hampshire. We heard the performance, and then afterwards, of course, we had to stand in line forever to be able to greet Joan and introduce ourselves to her. And you know, that was a moment that he would bring up years and years later. And those of you who knew him well probably know that on Christmas morning, he had a ritual of playing Joan Sutherland singing Christmas carols. And so every time I heard Joan Sutherland, I thought of him. And when she died, of course, we were on the phone to each other listening to her sing Lucia. So, you know, rest in peace, my friend. He left us too soon. And a special part of my life, and I hope I was a special part of his too.
Thank you.
Who else?
Someone referenced this earlier. Michael would call, and he would say, I would say, well, Mikey, how are things in your land? And he'd go, oh, I'm a little out of sorts. And I said, a little out of sorts, what's the problem? He said, things just, you know, things just aren't working quite the way I want them to. I said, well, what would make it better? And he said, a state funeral. It's time for us to have a good state funeral. And he relished them. And I thought, as I was watching Prince Philip's funeral, I thought, Michael, you left way too soon, because this would have been a great thing for you to enjoy. He always told me that after he developed diabetes, the thing that made him really sad was the fact that he had to limit his Texas sheet cake, and he had to limit his, what kind of pie was it that he always wanted? What?
Custard pie.
Yeah. But he was a delight, and if I got a little too cheeky once in a while, he would look at me and go, "Don't be hateful. Don't be hateful." And I use it a lot. So I'm sorry he missed Prince Philip's farewell.
But I was counting people, and there are 32 people here, so there are 2 more people here than
He
there
would
were
be so thrilled.
last weekend. He would be very, very happy. Anybody else? Any childhood stories?
Well, I forgot to tell you who I am.
Linda?
I'm Linda
Tell us who you
Bannister.
are. Great. A former student. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm Sue Stewart 80, so I guess I'll talk about the pain of Budsy that we moved. We've actually been friends for 70 years because Pana had this new social experiment, which was kindergarten. And I have a kindergarten picture, and at the head of the table, guess who was there? Betsy. And we were next to him. And class of 65, we still get together, so a group of us got together a few years ago, and Budsy's name came up, and so we decided, well, we would just call him. And so we called him, talked on the phone, and it was just like we had talked to him yesterday. So he got his roots here, and we loved him. And the sock hops were so great because you know how boys like to sit in the bleachers and not get out there and dance? Well, that wasn't Budsy. He was the first one out there, and we all wanted to dance with him because he was a great dancer.
I don't know that we know him as a dancer.
He had music in his soul. I have the yearbook that you can see the pictures. He was our valedictorian too. Wow.
Thank you. Sure, please, go ahead.
Just so you know, this is a recent picture of Max liberating some food off our counter. But just wanted to say, you know, Michael was a one-dog man, and it started with Alex when he was here in Pana. He had that dog on to graduate school. He had Bix, named after Bix Beiderbecke. Notice the X is Alex. Bix. It went on to Roxanne, and I helped liberate Roxanne in that time, and that's when I was in graduate school. He went on to have Jinx. And when Jinx died, he got Max. Max will turn 4 years old really right now, and I guess he'll spend the rest of his days in Hattiesburg. My wife Pamela and I are thrilled to see Michael because Max can be a little like he doesn't want to be told what to do as well. But it's an important part of today, I think.
Other stories?
I'm going to say one thing because I'm not sure I can get through much more.
Tell us who you are.
I'm Katie Beth Smith. Dr. D was like a father figure to me, much like Stacey. Anyway, the one story that I will never forget, and I take with me metaphorically into pretty much every situation. I helped him in the office quite a bit during my undergraduate time at Mizzou. And one day I was helping him edit one of the many books we worked on, and trying to find the right version, the most recent version, whatever it was we were working on. And so I was at his computer, and he was coming back in from his, you know it as the veranda now. He always described it to me as the outdoor office. So he was coming back in from his outdoor office, and I'm sure some of you have seen his office before. Just stacks of paper everywhere. No clear footpath really anywhere at all. And you know, someone mentioned his athleticism. Well, he came into the office and he literally walked to the desk and he looks up at me and he goes, "Life is a series of adjustments." And now I just take it with me everywhere because this is the hardest adjustment.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
I'm going to introduce Libby Roberts, and I had written this beautiful introduction for Libby, and then I decided I think it'll be better if Libby tells you about her relationship with Michael and what she's doing now to carry on his legacy and what she's going to add to our celebration today.
Yeah.
Libby Roberts.
Hey everybody, I'm Libby, and I met Michael Buds in 2017 as a graduate student, like many people who knew him. Reported over 15,000 students came through Mizzou under his tutelage. And I did not come to Mizzou for musicology. I came to study composition, and they had some great scholarships there, so I thought, why not? And my first experience on campus was at 7:30 in the morning. I don't wake up that early for any person, but I woke up that early to go to this class, and I knew within 10 minutes that I wanted to do musicology. My mother had talked to me growing up, I think you should write about music. You like writing and you like music. And I thought, well, that's stupid. My mother doesn't know what she's talking about. And he proved me wrong. He told me, he showed me that you can be a virtuoso educator and a virtuoso historian. He always talked about how his students should not just feel music, but think about music. And I think he felt music a lot, more than he let on sometimes. But I was his research assistant 2018, 2019, it runs together. And then I became his staff research assistant when he established the Bud Center for American Music Studies at Mizzou. And subsequently I have served as its interim director in his absence. But as some of you have mentioned, he loved his students and he loved surrounding himself with memories of them and the scholarship that he oversaw. One of the many things that I've been working on in the past few months is finding some sort of organization to the madness, and I have discovered probably those tax receipts that were mentioned earlier, among many other things, and one of the projects that I've been trying to do in the past few months here is find all the scholarship from the students that he left behind, because he kept all of it. And for those who've reached out to me, I've made sure that they've gotten digital copies or hard copies so they can keep those memories. In his life, he had talked about being lowered into the ground, surrounded by his students and their work, and there was way too much of it to fit. So, with the help of Rusty Elder, another Mizzou alum and dear friend, he's helped us reduce the papers to ashes, and it seems only fitting that he leaves this earth with his students and with their work. And so this is representative of over 700 students and over 1,200 individual assignments worth of work. So, and also his green pen, so I can continue working on them from beyond. Yeah, so with this, we thank him for counting us as his family, his students, and his friends, his colleagues, and may he continue helping us work on our scholarship and our love of music from even beyond this life. Thank you, Dr. Butts.
This is Sarah Vaughn singing Alone Again Naturally.
In a little while from now, if I'm not feeling any less sour, I promise myself to treat myself and visit a nearby tower. And climbing to the top, I'll throw myself off in an effort to make it clear to whoever what it's like when you're shattered, left standing in the lurch at a church where people say, my God, that's tough, you stood up. No point in us remaining, we may as well go home, as I did on my own, alone again, naturally. That only yesterday I was cheerful, bright and gay, looking forward to as who wouldn't do the role I was about to play. But as if to knock me down, reality came around 'cause a mere touch cut me into little pieces, leaving me to doubt. Talk about God in His mercy, who, if He really does exist, why did He desert me in my hour of need? I truly am indeed alone again, naturally. It seems to me that there are more hearts broken in the world that can't be mended, left unattended. What do we do? What do we do? Now looking back over the years and whatever else that appears, I remember I cried when my father died, never wishing to hide the tears. And at 65 years old, my mother, God rest her soul, couldn't understand why the only man she had ever loved had been taken, leaving her to start with a heart so badly broken, despite encouragement from me. No words were ever spoken, and when she passed away, I cried and cried all day, alone again, naturally. I cried and cried all day, alone again, naturally.
You know, the remarkable thing about Michael is that he loved so many different things. So he loved Sarah Vaughan, he loved Bach, he loved Leonin and Peritan, the great medieval composers, and he loved all kinds of poetry. But he was kind of a Victorian at heart. You know, his doctoral dissertation is about music in the court of Queen Victoria. So the poem that he asked to be read is Crossing the Bar by the great Victorian poet Alfred Lord Tennyson. And I can't think of a better, a more beautiful place to read this poem. I have to say, he's talked about this particular location, but this is actually a really, really special place, and I understand now why this place was really special to him. So this is Crossing the Bar. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. We have one more song to conclude with, but before that, I just want to mention that Janet Kessler has graciously agreed to have us at her house for a little lunch. And if you don't know where Janet lives, come see me or see her, and I'll give you her address. She has opened up her garage. It's a double-car garage. We're going to open some windows, so if you'd rather have a more outdoor atmosphere, but with a roof over your head, which I think is going to be important. We have that to offer you. So before we listen to the last piece, I just want to say thanks to, I think we're all overwhelmed by the turnout of all these people from different parts of Michael's life. I know he would be really, really happy and really moved. And I think it's been a really appropriate way to honor both his life and the incredible legacy that he leaves behind. So thank you all for being here. The last piece is Judy Collins singing I'll Be Seeing You.
Guys,